Anyone remember that Brett and Maria paternity drama that exploded on TikTok last year? Well, if you don't worry, because I'll be covering the whole story with more details that were revealed. But yeah, this story's back and it's a whole lot messier than any of us thought. Him talking out is apparently illegal.
And I'm not staying silent anymore. And if speaking the truth puts me in jail, so be it.
And there's a few more new colourful characters to add to the story. But let me just take a small moment to show that Brett actually promoted the video I made on him on one of his TikTok updates. But I might come on to that later. So now let's get into it. In this part, I'm breaking down every twist and turn from the beginning, including more details that we got from Brett's latest 10-part update, his eye-opening podcast interview, and a look into his many receipts, because if anyone saw my last video, the one thing I asked for was receipts, and he has not disappointed. So, let's get into it. The timeline according to Brett. It all started on December 12, 2020. Brett, just 24, meets Maria, who's around 31, at her birthday party in a small town restaurant. That night, they had a drunken one-night stand, no emotions involved. Over the next few months, Brett says he runs into Maria a few times because they live in a small town, so they casually see each other here and there in local bars and places. Then in April 2021, so 4 months after their meeting, out of nowhere, Maria texts Brett asking him to be a sperm donor. She explains to him that she's been single forever, she's desperate to have a child before it's too late, and insists that under the arrangement he wouldn't have any responsibilities of a father. And although he initially says no, he stated that his giving nature led him to agree, believing he was simply helping a woman desperate to have a child. Now he weirdly says here that he felt like he was doing something for a friend, like if you ask for $20 borrowed, then yeah, whatever, I'll lend you the $20 essentially. And I guess this part here shows his immaturity at saying yes, because he basically skips the safety net with a stranger, let's not even talk about STDs, to help create a whole human being and compares it to loaning out $20. So that part to me is a bit bizarre. So he basically calls himself a discount sperm donor, which he describes as a situation where no money changes hands, and he just basically helps her avoid high IVF costs. Apparently he told a couple of friends he was going to do this, and they just called him an idiot for agreeing, but I don't think anyone kind of tried to actively dissuade him out of doing this. So Maria has her birth control implant removed on May the 7th, and over 2 consecutive weekends they hook up to conceive. So the week commencing the 14th of May and the 21st of May.
So she invites me to brunch and she tells me she's pregnant, fully knowing that she's not. Then she starts drinking, like a lot. We then leave and go to another restaurant and meet up with my friend Dylan, and she also tells him that she's pregnant. Dylan and I think it's weird that she's drinking, but she insists it's okay. Here's the proof that this video is on June 6th.
Fuck this place, room to California.
Like, hey, you didn't get a lemon in you.
Oh, fuck, wrong way.
And then on July the 12th, he also says that she confirms the pregnancy to Brett, so I don't quite know how, in the space of basically 5 weeks, we have 2 pregnancy announcements, but that's what I understood from his story. He did say throughout this, it felt like she was trying to convince people she was in a relationship with him, so anytime they were together, she would get pictures and put it on her social media accounts. Between June 2021 and February 2022, so during the pregnancy, Brett's still under the understanding this is a one-time favour, no strings attached, but things begin shifting well before the baby's born. Maria reaches out to Brett's mother, first sending a friend request on Facebook, and eventually they meet in person, and listen to his mum's account of it.
Hello?
Hey, Mama.
The night, I guess that we first met, I guess was that night at the house show. One of the first things after we introduced ourselves and sat down, I can remember her saying to me that she hoped that I didn't think that she took advantage of my son. And of course I gave a polite answer to that. We went on to discuss, and she mentioned, how I guess she was impressed with you to be so young and so successful at that age. I can remember her mentioning your house and all your toys.
From that point on, Maria started pulling my mom in deeper.
Now, what seems really apparent here is she is trying to bring the parents into the loop and get them emotionally invested in a pregnancy. I did think it was a bit weird how his mom mentioned that Maria spoke about how well put together he was for his age with his house and his toys, which I guess hints to some sort of maybe financial interest potentially. And it's around this time that Brett's dad also steps in. He basically, asked Brett if he really wanted a girl to grow up without a father, and that message kind of weighed heavily on Brett, so he then decides to be a bit more present. So then the due date date comes around, 7th March 2022, which is also when the baby's born from my understanding. So Brett was torn between that original agreement of just being a sperm donor and then this pressure he's getting from his parents and I guess, subtly from Maria. So he decides to go to the hospital for the birth. He was the first to hold a baby, and in that emotional, kind of like high-pressured moment, he also signs the birth certificate in acknowledgement of paternity, and that legally binds him as the father. And that's a decision he now calls the biggest mistake of his life. And now keep this in mind, because I'm going to come back to this. So then mid-March rolls around, so a few weeks later, and she decides she wants a photo shoot, and orders a handkerchief for his dog, so takes a picture with the dog and the baby. His friends also come over, and she takes pictures with his friends and the baby. And it's actually quite funny, because one of the friends actually captions it as like the godfathers who weren't. So apparently I think she'd reached out to multiple of his friends and maybe family and was offering or saying they were being considered as godparents. And obviously not everyone was godparents. So he was making a bit of a jab at that, and apparently she liked the picture. So now we're getting on to the titular part of the relationship, which begins around after a month of the baby's birth. So it's around Easter 2022. During a family gathering, apparently Maria leaned over the railing right in front of everyone and told Brett to get his butt up here and take care of his child. And Brett's mom says that was the moment it became clear to her that Maria saw Brett as more than just a sperm donor. And up to that point, Brett was still under the impression he had no responsibility. He had agreed to help Maria become a mother. And while he says he might be open to help out in the future with things like college or a car down the line, he had not really agreed at this point to take on any active parenting role. Maria had always said she wanted to be a single mom and bear full responsibility. And she told him, though, if he wanted to get to know the child, that was fine, but there would be no obligations. At this point, bear in mind, Brett is living in California. And though he'd stepped into a few dad-like moments, like changing diapers and spending time with a baby, he said he didn't consider himself a parent, but that Easter confrontation was a shock to him. He says he felt really insulted by how it was handled and really blindsided by the expectations that he felt was suddenly being shoved on him. So then a few weeks after this incident, so it must be around May 2022, Maria asked Brett if she could stay in one of his Airbnb properties for a few months, rent-free. Brett didn't respond for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, but that was enough to trigger a really strong reaction. Maria basically tells him if he wasn't going to help, he should just sign his rights away. So feeling pressured and threatened, Brett just agrees to let her stay, and he states the financial impact was significant. He estimated it as around a $30,000 loss in rental income, and this really appears to be the point where the tone of the communication starts changing and becoming more emotionally manipulative. Shortly after that, Maria files an official court order for child support, and according to Brett, it wasn't just about money. It came after she got upset with him over something else. So during this, she offers that he could use her lawyer, saying it would make things easier. Brett says that when he spoke to the lawyer, that they commented that Maria was a little crazy, which to me is a bit weird for a lawyer to say that and disclose that, but there you go. He then said that the lawyer just told him to sign the agreement, that he wouldn't get any better than this, and fighting this would be expensive. So to avoid further conflict, he just decided to pay $10,000 up front and then began sending $750 a month. She then also weirdly sent him a text around this time asking if they could be a family, to which he clearly responds he doesn't want to. And then on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023, Brett posted a photo with a girl he was out with. Not long after, he received a message from Maria, and she basically criticized him for flaunting his social life while posting nothing about his daughter, calling him a loser and making him feel really guilty. Maria basically accuses him of not taking his daughter out for the day, so to make up for it, Brett sends her money so they could go out together. So by this point, Maria's behavior is becoming increasingly emotionally abusive. When she asks for child support a month earlier, Brett basically declines and she just texts him, "I hope you freaking die." Brett says this wasn't an isolated incident. Anytime he didn't send money early, despite already doing so multiple times, she would just lash out. She would begin withholding access to the child and refusing to let Brett see her unless he paid what she demanded. 2023, Brett starts dating nurse Hadley. She's a hospice nurse and an author known for sharing end-of-life stories on social media. She has 2.1 million followers on TikTok, and this was apparently how it started and how it all unfolded after that.
Hadley and I met at the gym, and we went on our first date on March 20th, 2024. About a month later, I brought Hadley to lunch with my mom. My mom told us about Maria texting her recently. Maria was saying that I was selfish, that I wasn't allowed to see the baby anymore, and that she didn't want the baby to grow up like me. Hadley said she can't do that. There's a court order. Because Hadley knew the system, she'd already been through it herself. On June 8th, we spent the day with the baby, Hadley's kids, and some close friends. We played cornhole, we went to a birthday party, and even had dinner with friends that night. It was just a good day. But when Maria found out that the baby and I were at Hadley's house, she lost it. She texted my mom saying I'll get to play house with their daughter. It's an interesting choice of words considering how the story ends. Maria demanded that I call her immediately or she's going to call the police. I had to leave the baby with Hadley and her friend to go to another room so I could calm Maria down. Soon after, I go on a bachelor trip that was planned months in advance. While I'm gone, Maria jumps on Facebook and has a full-blown meltdown. She says I'm absent from the baby's life and that I skipped town on Father's Day. I had just seen the baby a few days ago and already had a flight booked to be back on Father's Day. But reality doesn't stand a chance when Maria opened social media. Her post was public, no matter how many times she claims it was only friends and family. This little globe icon says otherwise. There's no way it was only her 5,000 close friends and family. Hadley saw it, her family saw it, probably half the state saw it. She called me a deadbeat. She said that I put my dick in anything that walks.
So Nurse Hadley around this time suspects he's not the dad, so let's listen to her part of it.
It is true that I was the one to figure out that Maria was lying, and as a nurse, I was always suspicious whenever he told me that she got pregnant immediately. But a few months into our relationship, we were sitting down with some friends who had just had a baby, and the baby had come early, and Brett said offhandedly, "Oh, my daughter was born on her due date." I resisted the urge for a few days, but curiosity did get the best of me, and I did put that due date into a online calculator to figure out the conception dates. The calculator gave me a window of when the baby could possibly be conceived, and I took those dates to him and asked him what he was doing during those dates. And he was on a almost 2-week guys trip during that time.
Hadley had brought up DNA test, and me thinking court was imminent, I thought it was a good idea to go ahead and order it. So that weekend when I had the baby, I decided to do it. So me and Hadley are just laying on the couch, laughing about something, and that's when I get a notification. It's an email from Paternity Lab. After I open this email, I read it, and I think I'm reading it wrong, but I scan it 3 times, and I see 0%. I look at Hadley, and I say, "I'm not the dad." And I just drop my phone. And she picks it up, and she says, "You're reading it wrong." You know, she starts scanning it, you know, and zooming in, and I'm over here just with my hands over my head. She looked at me and she said, "You're not the dad." And it just felt unreal. I felt shock. And that's when I immediately called my mom. Whenever she answered, I just said, "I'm not the dad." She didn't know us taking the test. It was a complete shock to her. She yelled at me. She said that that's not real. There's no way.
So yeah, Brett just goes on to explain like his extreme disbelief, his mother's, disbelief throughout this process. And so they decide to just do another test just to be 100% sure. I think Brett kind of comes to term while he's waiting to do this other test, but I think his parents, at least his mum, is still in disbelief. So he does another test, and that's the last time that he sees this little girl. And he feels a bit like an imposter doing it. He feels a bit, because he's already coming to terms, he's not the dad. He feels guilty when she calls him dada. So he's having all these conflicting feelings within him. And he does the test. He says it's quite a thorough test. Apparently it's 4 mouth swabs, 3 minutes each side, and you have to swab thoroughly. And apparently his mum even recorded the whole process of the second test being packaged and sent off, and just, I guess, wanted to take all the boxes. And they'd used a completely different company and brand to do it. And it came back, the same results, 0% paternity. And this is quite an emotional part of the story because he says that at one point, I don't know if it was Hadley or his mom, but someone suggested maybe they could just forget that they did the test and just act like nothing happened and he continued being the father if that was an easier option for him. And he had to really balance between this conflicting feelings of, I've created this bond with this child. I view her as my daughter. She views me as her dad. What is the right thing to do? I think he just came to the conclusion with all the conflicts that was happening with Maria, the way she was acting, the emotional abuse, the blackmail around, if you don't pay me, I'll withhold the daughter from you, and the fact that the daughter was still very young. He kind of decided to just come out and hopefully, 2 years and a half, hopefully this little girl will never remember he was her dad. So yeah, this was a very kind of emotional part of the story because it's like a loss in a sense. So he lost a daughter, his parents lost a granddaughter, and no doubt this little girl is one of the biggest victims of the story. She lost a father and, she lost a whole side of the family. So Brett then comes out with his story originally in October the 9th, 2024, and it explodes all over TikTok. And eventually gets basically a gag order put on him by Maria, and he has to take the video down, so he must have privated it. And we hear nothing from him until this month, April. So for 6 months, he has been essentially collecting evidence. And if anyone saw my last video, I really didn't side with anyone. I was kind of dubious of both their stories, to be honest. And I was just like, we need more receipts before we make some sort of a judgment. But he and Nurse Hadley just received a load of backlash online. There was lots of very strong opinions on both sides, either against Maria and her family or against him and Nurse Hadley. I think there was all sorts of stories around Nurse Hadley having her custody taken from her kids, stuff around one of her kids potentially having a disability, and I still stick by what I said in my last video. Just don't bring kids into this. Keep them as out of the stories as possible, especially her kids have nothing to do with this case. Like, let's just not even go there. And whether she lost custody or not, it's not even pertinent to this case. Come on, people. I just don't understand that. I don't know much about Nurse Hadley personally, only the superficial level stuff, so I have nothing either good or bad to say about it. There was one thing I have to pick with Brett on this. Watch what he says here.
So I post my video to my 100 followers, only to clear my name. I don't mention Hadley's name at all, and I keep the baby's identity hidden.
So to me, that seems to imply he just wants to share his story with his family and friends and clear up all the doubts that are being sown, which, fair enough. However, I remember there was an image shared, which I didn't see it personally, but I know it was widely shared when Nurse Hadley on September the 12th shared an image of Brett with his tattoo of the middle name, I think it is, of the daughter crossed off, and basically captioned it with, "If you know, you know, the most insane story time coming soon." Now, I think we've established she's big on social media. She's got over 2 million followers. So to me, this is not just a story being shared with 100 followers at this point. It's actually being shared much wider and promoted beforehand much wider. It's like a little promo, which honestly, this is a very small pick to have with Brett in this whole story, given what he's already endured with Maria. I don't blame him for wanting to share his story and clear his name. I don't even blame him if he wants a bigger platform than 100 followers, but it's all right to be honest about it. Like, there's no worry about being honest about it. No one needs to pretend it's just for 100 followers. It's fine. We're all enjoying the tea, even though there is a very sad story behind it. So honestly here, my thoughts on this is there are 3 sides to every story, and we have obviously gotten the biggest side from him. We haven't gotten much from Maria, but honestly, he's come with the receipts, and in all probability is just genuinely a victim of the story. I really do believe he's not the father, not only because of his receipts, but because Michelle herself has basically alluded to that. So very much in the clear for me. I do think he was an idiot for accepting this in the first place. He says he was young and dumb. 24. Yes, it's young, but is it really that young that you don't know what you're doing when you're procreating? I don't know. Yeah, that's where he screwed up really, but he's paid for it in ways he should never have paid for something like that. So my heart goes out to that. Him, the impact on his family. Obviously, even Nurse Hadley, like, this is not a very great situation to be in. And it also impacts their relationship. Just check out what she said here.
On top of the stress that comes with something as serious as this, our relationship dynamic has changed a lot as well, because now only one of us is a single parent. We have both questioned at times last few months if we should still be in a relationship, and I hate to admit that. Everyone wants the relationship to be perfect, but the truth is that it's been hard and we're still figuring it out, and that's why I was not ready to announce this publicly yet, but it is what it is, and we'll see.
So yeah, the baby and Brett and family are all honestly just victims in this. And all because Maria apparently believed he genuinely was the child's father. But honestly, to me, if you have any single doubt, you should do a paternity test and be upfront with the father about it. When it comes to paternity, there is no I believed or I was 99% sure. No, you need to be 100% sure. These are so many lives that are being impacted by this, especially the one you should care about the most, which is your daughter. So I really don't see how she just believed in that. And the weird part here with this is, honestly, how did she believe he was the father when the conception window was so out of whack with when they had last relationships? This is if we are to believe, obviously, Brett's side that they only had intercourse in those 2 consecutive weekends in May. Because look at this. Maria posted that the baby was due 7th of March 2022, and apparently she'd been born that day. If we work back from this, which if you use a calculator and look at the ultrasound and the date that she basically said was a due date, the 7th of June, then the conception window would basically be between the kind of 15th to 26th of June, which is basically a month after they supposedly had intercourse. And even if you're trying to go with a much less likely but still possible scenario, it would give you between the 5th and 14th of June that they would have had to have had intercourse for this baby to have been conceived. So if Brett is indeed telling the truth, which it does appear to be so, given he was so adamant and the tests came back as 0% paternity, then in my mind, she should have had way more doubts about the paternity here. You might not know 100% he's not the father at this point unless you use the calculator, but you should at least have some doubts and bring it up and try to figure out who the dad really is. And if Brett is right, and she really did have her period basically on the 6th of June, which is when she told him she was pregnant, that makes it even worse, because then she might have deliberately tried to lie to him and wasn't even pregnant at the time she told him. And regardless, even if he was the father, a lot of those text messages Brett shared, it does show a lot of emotional abuse, which is just so toxic and damaging, really. So that's the only silver lining for Brett, is at least he got out of that situation. It is just a pity, the little girl that unfortunately was involved in all this. And when I say got out of the situation, I don't think he's fully out yet, because apparently according to the state of Mississippi, once you sign an acknowledgement of paternity paper, you only have 1 year to contest like whether you're the father or not, and obviously that time has elapsed. So I'm not quite sure where the case sits. Brett hasn't really said yet where it is. I think he might be releasing more parts, so we might have more clarification as to where the court case is, but I think he probably still is responsible for the child and still legally its father, so we'll have to see what transpires from there. You might want to stick around for a part 2 I'm thinking about making, and it will be more into depth on Maria and her side. And apparently there's a whole theory around why she wouldn't want the baby daddy to be known as a baby daddy at the time of the birth, a whole legal implication that has to do with the state of Mississippi, so it might be one worth sticking around for. Thanks guys, and what are your thoughts on this one? It continues to be a wild ride.